Score more with the college-branded Venmo debit card and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash. Got paid back? With the Venmo debit card, you can instantly access your balance and spend on what you want, like game day snacks, gear, tickets, and more. The more you do, the more cash back you can earn. Plus, there's no monthly fee or minimum balance. Sign up now at Venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
So good, so good, so good.
New spring arrivals are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Get ready to save big with up to 60% off Rag & Bone, Marc Jacobs, Free People, and more.
How did I not know Rack has Adidas?
Because there's always something new.
Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan, Capitol Bureau Chief and host of Under the Dome. I'm joined today by politics reporter Avi Bajpai and higher education reporter Korie Dean on this Monday, July 7th that we're recording. And if y'all are listening to this on Tuesday, July 8th, there's not a lot going on at the legislature unless something breaks this afternoon on Monday. And that's pretty much by design. When they left at the end of June, they decided they would take a break and haven't even picked a date to come back yet. They're still arguing about that. But we do know the House had planned skeletals for 2 weeks, and we're now in week 2 of that. But a lot of the action has been over in the executive mansion, or depending on where Governor Josh Stein spends his day-to-day, the Albemarle building, because that's where his offices are. And he has been signing and vetoing all kinds of bills. And what we're going to talk about today, we'll talk about impact on higher ed from the Trump's bill at the federal level. And we'll talk about these vetoes that are waiting for potential overrides when the legislature comes back. It could be a couple of days this month. If they don't agree on that, it could end up being in August. So a couple of veto overrides they did not take up before adjourning were 2 on immigration and getting rid of the permit to conceal carry handguns in the state, and 3 different DEI bills. So I'm going to start with the DEI bills and turn first to you, Korie, because this is kind of familiar. So there are 3 different anti-DEI bills, higher education, K-12, and state government.
Yeah, so specifically on higher ed, people may remember that last year, the UNC System Board of Governors repealed the system's former DEI policy, and that mandated that campuses do things like employ a chief diversity officer and meet certain benchmarks related to DEI. So they repealed that policy, replaced it with a policy that's commonly referred to as the equality policy. It emphasizes like equality, institutional neutrality, things like that. Notably, that policy did not specifically or explicitly ban DEI, but the practical applications of it resulted in all of the DEI offices across the UNC system, which is all of the public universities and the School of Science and Math. All the DEI offices have either closed or significantly restructured. Like dozens of employees or job positions were eliminated, dozens more were restructured. So again, a lot of this that the anti-DEI bill that lawmakers have passed, a lot of that already exists in practice under what the system had already done. However, there are some noticeable differences, I guess. One is that the anti-DEI bill is exactly that. It specifically is called Eliminating DEI in Public Higher Ed. And it specifically says that colleges, and the bill includes the university, so the UNC system schools, the 4-year schools, and the community colleges. That's a noticeable difference. But it specifically says that they have to, I believe, close DEI offices. It also has a list of like 13 concepts that basically can't be promoted on campuses. And we've seen those exact concepts before. I believe it was in a bill last year or a couple years ago for like state workplace trainings. So this would extend that to the universities. So again, a lot of this is already in place, but it is a lot more explicit, a lot more specific, and would extend it to the community colleges.
And so it's three separate bills that they passed. Our colleague Kyle Ingram wrote a story about the vetoes in that last week. Avi, were you there for any of the debate on these three bills? Did they run them together? I mean, it's kind of like they'd been floating out there, but it's three different bills.
Yeah, there was some question of whether or not in the end they would be kind of put together into one package, but they did end up going to Governor Stein's desk as three separate bills. I think the noticeable thing from the building was that these bills really united Democrats in opposition, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that they all passed along party lines. So this is one where it's really a big question if Republicans are confident they'll have some pathway for an override, because in the House at least they need some kind of help from Democrats, either one Democrat siding with them or some absences. So that's something really kind of curious of there.
I mean, it doesn't look like they have the votes for it. I mean, it's interesting that they separated all three if they think that they can get a vote on one of them but not the others, or just waiting on the math in the room. But House Speaker Dustin Hall has said that if Stein vetoes something, our plan is to try to override it. He also has added that it may not be like soon, but more eventually, and that kind of takes us to the next potential veto override, which is getting rid of the state law that requires a concealed carry permit. Now, several Republicans took a walk, both in committee and then on the floor, and two voted against it. And so within the Republican caucus, they're not really interested in this. And we're talking mostly about the House, because the House is, one vote short of that 3/5 supermajority required to overturn a veto, where the Senate is, the exact line with Republican and Democrat party lines. Republicans have it, and they could turn that easily. So that might be one that isn't going to come up soon. The immigration bills, though,
immigration ones, I think the Republicans are bullish, especially. I think probably it's fair to say in both chambers they're confident in both bills, but especially the House bill, which is to kind of tweak last year's HB 10 and put into law another required notice between sheriffs and ICE in that whole detainer process. But that's a bill where there's been reporting done. One of our colleagues in the Capitol Press Corps, Brian Anderson, has reported that Representative Carla Cunningham has basically signaled that she is a vote to override a veto. She voted for that bill. That was something that Speaker Dustin Hall told us previously that he was confident in too. So, and I think when Stein vetoed both of those immigration bills, even Senate Leader Phil Berger was putting out a statement pretty quickly vowing to override the vetoes. Now that happened when there was still 1 week where lawmakers were in Raleigh. Of course, it didn't happen during that week, and both Berger and Hall were saying it was basically because of attendance issues. They needed all of their members in town, and on any given day they didn't have everyone there. So that's one to watch. But the week when they basically left town, the last day that they were there, I think it was Thursday, Hall put out, right as lawmakers were wrapping business up on Thursday and heading out of the building, he put out a video on Twitter promising to override the veto. So I'm pretty sure that that's something that's at the top of their list agenda wise.
And it's important to note that the House and Senate don't have to hold their overrides at the same time. They'll just wait until they have the numbers if they're successful, because unless there's some sort of surprise on the floor, I don't think Hall or Berger, of course, would call a vote when they don't know that it's going to be successful. So Cunningham, as you mentioned in the past, has been one to watch. There are several other Democrats, more swing Democrats, that could vote differently. And we also have the budget that we're over a week into the fiscal year, and the budget. This is kind of normal now. It's just the same spending levels. If you're a state employee or teacher listening to this, once they reach a deal and there is some sort of raises and that becomes law, it'll be retroactive, which you probably experienced a few years ago when budget deals were very late, almost at Thanksgiving. And of course, in 2019, not at all. But one factor we really need to think about is that this Trump bill that's now law that he signed into law on the 4th of July, calls it his big bill.
Big, beautiful bill.
Right.
Act.
It, among other things, it does take the space shuttle from the Air and Space Museum, but it does a lot of other
That's the top line takeaway for the bill summary.
It also does a lot of things that it turns money back to the states for huge things like SNAP, Medicaid expansion, which is, of course, is why U.S. Senator Tom Tillis, strongly opposed this. And we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the impact of, or what we think might be the impact of this Trump bill, and then more about higher education when it comes to accreditation. We'll be right back.
It's crunch time at work, and you need to bring wings to your workday. Visit redbull.com/gettingitdone and answer a couple questions about your work style to get a Spotify customized playlist tuned to your productivity. Plus, score a can of Red Bull on us while you go from to-do to done. And remember, Red Bull gives you wings. Supplies are limited. Terms apply. Visit the website for more information.
Pros, just because something on the job runs out doesn't mean you have to. Order it on the Lowe's app. My Lowe's Pro Rewards members get free same-day delivery on eligible orders over $25. Get the fasteners, hardware, or tools you need to keep the job moving. Order by 2 p.m. and get eligible in-stock items delivered right to your job site by 8 p.m. Members get more at Lowe's. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Subject to availability. Restrictions and terms at lowes.com/shipping terms. Subject to change.
You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm Capitol Bureau Chief Dawn Vaughan here with Korie Dean and Avi Bajpai. Before the break, we were talking about the impact of the federal government on state government. And, not having a state budget actually gives them a little more time to consider the potential impacts of this DC spending bill and what that's going to mean for North Carolina. A lot of it looks like it's going to be a down the road thing, but for them to start thinking about it now, I don't know if this will make negotiations better or worse between House and Senate Republicans over future tax cuts. We'll find out. And I don't know if, they've even spoken to each other this past week. Everyone, I think, was enjoying their 4th of July week off, and probably this week too. So the impact of the Trump bill also extends to higher education. Korie, what should people know about that?
Yeah, I think, first of all, credit to the great reporters at Inside Higher Ed, because that's where I'm referencing to get a lot of this. But I think one of the biggest things that people, were paying attention to before the bill is impacts to Pell Grants for students. The House's version of the quote big beautiful bill would have had pretty drastic changes to who was eligible for Pell Grants. That's changed now under the version that passed and that President Trump signed. But it does exclude students if you've gotten financial aid that covers the full cost of your attendance, like from, I believe, either your university or state aid or other forms of aid. You are now no longer eligible for a Pell Grant. So that changes a little bit. There's also changes to the loans that parents can take out to support their children as they go through college, that the Parent Plus loans are now capped at $65,000 per student. There's also changes to graduate student loans. So they can only borrow, I think it's $100,000. And so, yeah, just a lot of changes to who's eligible for what kinds of financial support and aid, what, how much money they can take, they can receive. So, yeah, I think, it'll be interesting. I think there are some provisions for student loans that I believe go into effect next year. So it'll be interesting to see how that trickles down and impacts the universities here in North Carolina.
Korie, let's stick with you and talk about accreditation changes and a little bit of political involvement, or at least commentary about what's going on.
Yeah, so this is from, I believe, a couple weeks ago now. The UNC system announced that it is going to partner with 5 other states in the South. It's Florida, Georgia, Texas, South Carolina, and Tennessee, and they are going to create a new accreditor. So if you think about accreditation, really it's really central to financial aid. If you want to receive federal financial aid from the federal government, you have to go to an accredited school. Accreditation was kind of invented to make sure that colleges weren't like just diploma mills, that they were up to snuff, that they had standards. So, but in the past couple of years, accreditation has become highly politicized. And a lot of that rhetoric has come out of Florida with Governor Ron DeSantis. He's a Republican. He refers to the accreditors as a cartel, as a woke monopoly on accreditation. So these 5 states have announced that they're going to band together and create a new accreditor only for public colleges. It'll probably take a couple years for this to get off the ground, but they announced it a couple weeks ago, and it was very interesting, I would say, to see the rhetoric between, again, Governor Ron DeSantis was the one that announced this in Florida at an event. I also spoke to UNC Assistant President Peter Hans before the announcement, and he was very adamant that, this is, he believes the right thing for public colleges, that the current process is duplicative, that public universities already have lots of oversight from the state government. Here in North Carolina, they're audited every year by the state auditor's office. And that he feels it's duplicative for the new accreditors to do that, assessment again. However, Ron DeSantis, in his remarks, again, called the accreditors, I believe it was a woke accreditation cartel, and really used more partisan language to describe this. So I think it'll be interesting to see how North Carolina, I've reported out in the past about similarities between North Carolina and Florida higher ed, but this is like really the first concrete, tangible partnership that the 2 states have had. And it'll be really interesting to see, I think, more of the rhetoric that comes out of that. So,
Cartel, I feel like that hasn't been used in North Carolina politics, and maybe former Treasurer Falwell.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
And I'll also say that Senate Leader Phil Berger weighed in and also used that rhetoric. He tweeted a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and he called it an accreditation cartel. Said, North Carolina can't let them, quote, run our schools. And the General Assembly has acted on accreditation before. A couple years ago, they enacted a law that was the same as one Florida had, requiring schools to switch accreditors every cycle. So yeah, it's kind of a wonky policy thing, maybe a little bit boring, but
Perfect for our audience. We're here for all your wonky policy needs. All right. The other things to note this week before we get to our picks for headliner of the week, Council of State is Tuesday morning. I'll be at that. We'll see what usually they're going around the table time is the most interesting other than the property matters they deal with. So we'll see if Stein wants to talk about any of the pending legislation. He's still got a bunch of stuff on his desk, not as much of the controversial things. And then we're also waiting on if Speaker Hall and Senate Leader Berger have any sort of communication discussion on setting a date to come back this month for those potential veto override votes that we talked about at the top of the show. All right, moving on to headliner of the week. Korie, what is your headliner of the week?
Yeah, so we're recording this Monday, and this past weekend, particularly Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, there was really, really significant flooding. I'm sure as listeners know, particularly in Orange County, Durham, Alamance County, from kind of the remnants, the tail end. I think it probably hit as Tropical Storm Chantal. Anyway, just historic levels of flooding in some areas, or near historic levels, not seen since Hurricane Fran. I was not alive then, but that's when people are comparing the level of flooding to. My mom just moved to Mebane, which has pretty significant flooding. So just, keeping an eye on that and the impacts there.
And this comes on the heel of, devastating flooding in Texas and all those losses there. And maybe not the greatest storm season, Yeah. All right, Avi, I'll go to you next. What's your pick for headliner of the week?
I'm going to go back to last week and just shout out the towns of Clayton and Garner for putting on really great fireworks and just a great 4th of July celebration. I went to both with my family. My parents and grandmother are in town basically this past week and this week. So we had a really great time. We went to Lake Benson Park in Garner. There was a great sort of like program over there. We saw the North Carolina Symphony. They played a few jazz standards. They played the original theme song from like the original Superman movie, which was great to hear after a long time. And of course, they closed it out with Stars and Stripes Forever, which I love. So that was great. Great fireworks. And then Clayton too, actually, that was on the 4th, and we went and snagged the last parking spot available in the Clayton High School parking lot. And that was a great show. So yeah, good stuff.
I saw fireworks of that people bought and set off lately. My headliner, and actually I think I mentioned this last week or the week before about seeing the new Jurassic World movie. I saw Jurassic World Rebirth. It was good for like a summer movie in the theater. I would have liked more dinosaurs, especially more like ocean dinosaurs and flying dinosaurs. So but yeah, it's worth it. It's, summer.
If
summer
the producers are listening,
more
Here's
dinosaurs.
Jurassic World Rebirth or whatever the next one's gonna be.
Yeah,
called.
it was your typical like formulaic, action movie. But and I loved the cutie little dinosaur too, Angel Lawrence. So I'm sure other people didn't, but I thought that was pretty cute. All right, we're out of time. For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan with reporters Korie and Avi Bajpai and producer Laura Bajpai. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
For more from our politics team, subscribe to the News and Observer at newsobserver.com/subscribe. Sign up for our political newsletter, also called Under the Dome, at newsobserver.com/newsletters. Thanks for listening.